Good evening and welcome. My name is Keith Cole and I have the privilege and pleasure to serve as the Executive Director for the Wolf River Conservancy. Welcome to tonight's virtual lecture entitled Memphis Water that will be presented by Sarah Houston of the Protect Our Aquifer organization. Sarah's presentation tonight is part of our continuing Wolf River Restoration Series. Our Wolf River Restoration Series is a 4-month project that started in January with Martin Luther King Day of Service, continued through February and early March with tree plantings. This week we're honoring World Water Day, which was actually yesterday, March 22nd, and we're highlighting the importance of clean drinking water and the fact that we in Memphis and Shelby County in West Tennessee have a great abundance of water, but we certainly cannot take it for granted. Also, along with tonight's virtual lecture on Saturday, we will have a service project down on Harbor Town. We'll be cleaning up both on the land and on the water. So visit our wolfriver.org website to see this week's activities as well as all the activities we have between now and Earth Day on April 22nd. Most importantly, we want to share with you that we're very happy to have again Brother International as our corporate sponsor for the Wolf River Restoration Series. Brother International has been a great corporate citizen, a very good supporter for the Wolf River Conservancy for several years. If you don't know Brother International, they've called Bartlett, Tennessee their home since the mid-1980s. We're happy to have them as part of our support for tonight and for all their support throughout the year. And of course, we want to recognize all of our corporate benefactors, Buckman International, and Crawford Howard Family Foundation. Those two groups sponsor our virtual lectures throughout the year, including tonight's lecture as well. But we also have all of our corporate benefactors, AutoZone, Brother International, who I've mentioned, FedEx, Hyde Family Foundation, International Paper, Jim Karras Subaru, Ring Container Technologies, and we have a new corporate benefactor that we're so pleased to share with you, Silvalmo. So we're happy to have Silvalmo as a new corporate benefactor support the work of the Wolf River Conservancy throughout the year. Of course, all of our supporters, corporations, community organizations, and individuals are important. We cannot do our work without your financial help, but also your volunteer help, and we appreciate all that. As always, if you want to make a gift, online is the preferred way to make a gift. There'll be in our chat box, you'll have a link where you can make a gift for tonight, or at any time you can always visit wolfriver.org. Some housekeeping details: please do not record tonight's presentation. If you've registered, you will receive an email later with a link that will take you to the recording of tonight's presentation, which you can share with others if you would like to do so. Also, as a reminder, if you have questions during the presentation, to please use the Q&A function of the Zoom meeting. Our Director of Education, Kathy Justice, will be monitoring those questions. At the end of the evening, she will present those to Sarah, and Sarah will be happy to answer those questions as they come in then. We do have a very brief video from Brother International that we'd like to share with you before we introduce Sarah and we continue the presentation. So we can roll the video.
Good evening and welcome. Brother is proud to partner with the Wolf River Conservancy to bring our community together through service and education with great events like the Wolf River Restoration Series in order to sustain the river's ecosystem for generations to come. The historic Wolf River travels roughly 100 miles through Mississippi and Tennessee. Our region's first people used the river for food, trade, and transportation, while the forest became home to all types of plants and animals. Over time, human activity failed to care for the natural habitat, but today, the wolf is thriving. Remaining committed to sustainability and protecting our local communities is the responsibility of all of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother International, for your support. We appreciate that. Tonight, we are so excited to share with you our presenter, Sarah Houston. Sarah Houston not only is the Executive Director for Protect Our Aquifer, but she's a good friend of the Wolf River Conservancy and has helped us in so many ways. And we've worked with her not only through Protect Our Aquifer, but also with Caesar formerly. So she has a vast background of experience in the work that she's doing today. As the Executive Director for Protect Our Aquifer, Sarah was the first full-time staff person for this organization. Before joining Protect Our Aquifer, she traveled over 8,000 miles by bicycle, educating on YouTube about the water sources along the way. This led her to take a position at the University of Memphis, Caesar, or as many of us called it, the Groundwater Institute, several years ago, which is our region's leading aquifer research center. Throughout Sarah's career, she's worked closely with stakeholders in the wastewater, stormwater, and drinking water sectors, and continues to pursue a multidisciplinary approach to water management. Sarah spends her free time outdoors, biking, kayaking, and dancing to the great music found in Memphis. Sarah, thank you so much for being here tonight. Sarah?
All right. Well, thank you so much. I am so glad to be here. I'm gonna make sure, get everything moving. All right. So everyone should be able to see my screen. So Keith, thank you so much for that introduction. Wolf River Conservancy, thank you for having me. And everybody that's tuning in tonight, thank you so much. So at Protect Our Aquifer, our mission is to protect, conserve, and preserve the Memphis Sand Aquifer, which is our primary source of drinking water in Shelby County and really this whole region surrounding us. Now, as Keith mentioned, I came here by interesting means, this bicycle tour, and I wanted to give a little brief story. When we were pedaling into Memphis, before we got to all of our big cities, we would research, where does the drinking water source come from? And that was part of our YouTube education series. And I was looking it up and I found that there's this massive aquifer system below Memphis. And it really blew my mind. We've got this incredible river at our front door. We don't use a drop of it. And I'm looking up organizations that deal with water in Memphis, and Wolf River Conservancy came up. And actually, I talked on the phone with Keith Cole back in 2017 when I was living on my bicycle and asked him, what do I need to know? Who do I need to talk to? And he actually directed me to Dr. Brian Waldron at the University of Memphis, who eventually became my boss and, was the reason I moved to Memphis in the first place in 2018. So, that phone call really led to a whole series of events that brought me here to this moment right now. So Keith, thank you for that. And Wolf River Conservancy, thank y'all. So today I'm going to do kind of a two-part series. One is really going to be Aquifer 101, the geology, and really the problems that we see here specifically in Shelby County. And I'm going to pause after that and be able to let y'all answer questions just kind of generally. And then I'm going to go into some more specifics about current issues and the Ford mega site. So we got to start off, what is an aquifer? Well, an aquifer is a layer of sediment that contains water. So it's usually stored beneath ground in either a rock formation, a sand formation. So if you look at this diagram, this unconsolidated aquifer, that represents what we have here in Memphis. So you can see with that arrow down below, we have a slower flow. When you go out towards East Tennessee or the Ozarks to the west of us, that's a karst formation. That water moves much more quickly. It can be very prone to contamination, but with our system, it's a lot harder to understand how it works. Then you see this clay doesn't even have a water flow. It technically is water bearing, but it doesn't necessarily allow for that flow of water to move. And we'll talk about why clay is such a key part of our aquifer system here. But the Memphis Sand Aquifer is actually part of a much larger system called the Mississippi Embayment. So I'm giving y'all a little geology lesson way back in time. So over 90 million years ago, our North American plate was moving, and it moved above what's called the Bermuda hotspot. That hotspot now exists in the Bermuda Triangle, but 90 million years ago, our plate came to rest upon that. And through the faults that are naturally occurring here, this magma plume was able to bubble up to the surface and really heat the land. And you can see it create this major lift. Well, over the millions of years, our plate continued to move on, that land subsided, and it created this large depression. And you can see in this image to the right, where the coastline, when we had this shallow ocean reach into our land now about 77 million years ago, you can actually see that impression of the Mississippi embayment, this kind of upside down U. So you'll see this formation in a moment. And so what happened is the sea was able to flow in and out and in and out. And what we see today is kind of a bird's eye view formation that looks like this. The dark blue outline is the actual Memphis Aquifer, the Memphis Sand Aquifer. And you can see it touches much more than just Tennessee. And the larger Mississippi embayment is actually that lighter blue outline. So this is a large 9-state system. West Tennessee is really where the system is the thickest, right here in this mid-south tri-state area. But if you think about what it looks like underground, it's this trough. It's this trough formation. And as the ocean flowed in and out, depositing alternating layers of sands and clay, you cut our land in half and you get something that looks like this. So a few things to note in this: we do have a shallow aquifer directly below Memphis. So depending on where you are in the city or, outside out in the outskirts, you might only need to dig down maybe 15 to 30 feet to actually reach water. Now that water is not going to be the nice, clean, clear, crisp Memphis Sand Aquifer water. It's going to have, a little bit of a muddier sediment, similar to what you see in the Wolf River. Then you go a layer lower, you've got this thick confining layer. That's that clay that I spoke of earlier. And that clay really doesn't allow for much, downward vertical movement of water. It acts this pressurizing layer above our Memphis Sand Aquifer. And you can just see how massive this formation is. And directly below the Mississippi, you get about an 800-foot thick layer. We have this incredible resource directly below our feet, out of sight, and it's been out of mind. Some of our water does actually come from the Fort Pillow Aquifer, the layer deeper. It's going to be communities farther to the east that are going to be actually using that, where it's closer to the surface. The McNary Aquifer is a much more brackish saline formation, and it's so far down. We don't use that as a water source, really. When you get farther to the rural east, you do get some users of that. And then one other thing is this recharge zone. And we will be talking about the recharge zone. And the Wolf River really plays a key function in the Memphis Sands Aquifer sustainability and that recharge zone. But one thing that we have learned, as a scientific community over the past 60 years is that clay layer that separates our shallow aquifer from our Memphis Sand Aquifer actually has naturally occurring gaps. We'll call them gaps, breaches, windows. Depending on who you're talking to, you'll see these different terminologies, but they create this connection between that shallow system and that Memphis Sand Aquifer. And this will give you a little brief understanding of where we know or suspect these breaches to be right now in Shelby County. And this is a map from Caesar back when I worked there. And this is something I worked on with some of our scientists and interns to create these images. But you can see, we know where some are. And when we say known, it means there's been a drill. It's been drilled through that area and the layers of sediment have been analyzed and no clay was found. These yellow areas are where it's suspected breaches, meaning the models look funky, the water table's looking weird, something we know is going on that's making us think water is funneling down through that gap. Now, this is important because when you have contamination, and Memphis has been, an industrial city for nearly 200 years, when you have that clay layer intact, contaminants will really only move in a more horizontal sense. But if you have an area where there's missing clay, especially if it's near a well, like what's depicted right here, that contamination can connect to our aquifer and actually get pulled towards our wells. Now, this type of research is the main study of a large study between MLG&W and the University of Memphis Caesar. And that started back in 2018 and was continuing through 2023. And they're just scratching the surface on really understanding the intricacies of this system. And if you look at kind of where we're pumping our water, we have wells scattered throughout Shelby County and really the whole region. Very concentrated here though in Shelby County. And these larger gray blocks, that's what are called well fields. So MLGW operates 10 well fields within the city of Germantown, Collierville, Bartlett, Millington. They all operate their own individual well fields as well. And between all of this, there's other little holes poked all around our city where private industries or even just private residential areas have wells accessing the aquifer. So we have many places where water is actually being extracted. And this has not been well mapped or well understood to understand where pollution may exist and where this pumping is occurring. And when I'm talking about pollution, we have a problem here in Memphis, and it's really the whole region, but Memphis especially being an old industrial town. And so this image here shows you kind of mix of all those layers. These dots and points, these are known or suspected contamination sources. Some might only be, a couple gallons of gasoline spill. Some might be major chemical spills. So we have a lot of issues here, and you can see where the well fields are, where the breaches are, and where these points of contamination are. And when Protect Our Aquifer is thinking about issues to activate on or how we're really trying to achieve some kind of forward movement in protecting our drinking water source, we look to identify certain things like, is there a known contaminant? Is it above or very near a breach? And is it close to a drinking water well field where we're actually extracting our water? And so, for example, here we've got the former Custom Cleaners, which is a Superfund site designated by the EPA right across the street from the University of Memphis, sitting above a breach, and it's less than a mile from the Sheehan pumping station. You have another area of concern in South Memphis near the Alcee Ball neighborhood. The Memphis Defense Depot was a World War II big facility where they made all kinds of different chemical warfare, tanks, lots and lots of things were produced there. And back then there was not the same disposal laws that we have today. And many of those chemicals were just buried and they weren't really addressed until the 1990s. So you had 50 to 60 years of contaminants sinking in to the ground towards our aquifer and in close proximity to the Allen well field. And the story is similar. Over here in our Southwest Memphis corner, we've got TVA coal ash pits that were unlined. That was a standard practice of the day. Just dig the pit and dump this coal ash into it. But it turns out that this coal ash has arsenic and toxic levels of fluoride and lead, and it's slowly been sinking into our shallow aquifer system near a breach right above it and within proximity of the Davis well field. And lastly, I'll point out, we've got another issue in Collierville, and Collierville owns their own drinking water treatment stations. And there are 3 Superfund sites, all located in close proximity to each other, that have TCE, hexavalent chromium, which is the Aaron Brockovich chemical that we've heard so much about, and some other just heavy industrial chemicals that, again, there either weren't disposal laws when these issues came up, or there were accidents and there were spills, and it's actually impacted one of Collierville's municipal well fields where they've had to shut it down completely. They do have other well fields, so they're able to withdraw water from elsewhere, but this is all of these are ongoing remediation efforts done by the company, whether they're a company at fault whether it's the state regulator TDEC or it's EPA. We have lots of moving pieces and parts. And these issues, they really need coordination. We have solutions, but it's a very patchwork, piecemeal approach to implementation and really even enforcement. So who's in charge in Shelby County? In Shelby County, back in the late 1980s, ordinances were passed to actually establish what's called the Shelby County Groundwater Quality Control Board. I know that's a mouthful. For short, we usually call it just the Groundwater Board. And this formed out an ordinance where all the municipalities signed on, and their mission is to secure, protect, and preserve the quality and quantity of groundwater. Sounds great, right? And their technical staff technically comes from the Shelby County Health Department. And so they have one of the many sub-departments of the health department is this pollution control arm, and they have a few staff members working in water. And they're supposed to be providing technical and administrative support to the board. Now, unfortunately, it's been about 30-something years since this was all formed up and dreamed up. And as you can imagine, Shelby County Health Department is busy in many, many other realms besides just water. There are only about 5 water employees. They do septic system permitting, they do well permitting, but they're really not staffed to supervise the extent of the issues we have here and to really think about aquifer management as a whole. And the Groundwater Board doesn't have a specific budget for scientific assessments, to hire consultants. That's all done in a very piecemeal fashion. There is a potential contract coming up for University of Memphis to do some monitoring well networks to actually start to implement some of these lofty goals that were set forth in the late 80s. And that's, kind of a one-time fee, a one-time project. There's not this ongoing understanding of how we're managing our water resources. And so Protect Our Aquifer really believes that we need holistic water management that really bridges between the policy, the science, and how we operate our wells and how we operate depending on our, depending on our aquifer system. So Shelby County is definitely our home. It's definitely where, our organization started. And we've got a lot of issues here in Shelby County alone, but we have to think about regionally as well. And we are doing that, especially with the news of the Ford mega site. So I'm going to leave that for right now. And so I'm going to give y'all, some time to put into the chat questions that just might have come up from this right now. So Kathy, if there's anything that's come up, I'm happy to answer those. And otherwise I will continue to on the presentation.
Okay, Sarah, it's wonderful so far. And we do have one question. How often are drills used to determine where breaches are? And what action is taken from this analysis?
That is a great question. So as far as the frequency of it, it's very dependent on funding. And so Caesar, like I said, they've got this large project with the University of Memphis, and they'll usually drill looking specifically for breaches a couple times a year at max. And so what you really want to do is you want to be able to try and pinpoint where that's occurring. But in addition to Caesar, EPA does do these groundwater investigations on the sites they are tasked with cleaning up. So the former custom cleaners, they just drilled this summer in multiple points all around that site to start to do that geo analysis of what's going on with the layers and with the groundwater contamination. So as far as the frequency, it's infrequent and it's not consistent. And when it comes to what action is taken, so depends on who's in charge of the site. Right now with the University of Memphis, Caesar, they're producing a lot of information. Now, how that action is actually taken, that's to be determined. And that's something that Protect Our Aquifer is really working to ensure that, MLGW has the information they need and the community support they may need to act on that information. But then EPA, they are right now with that former custom cleaner site. That's going to be one of my examples for the day. They are looking at what their remediation plan will be. And so that will be presented to the public and will be open for the public comment. It should be sometime this spring or summer. We've been in contact with the project manager over that, and we will definitely let folks know when those times come so that they can be active participants in that comment period and make sure that what their investigation is seeing is real to, you know, us understanding what happens here in our own community.
Okay, one more question has come up. Given the limitations of budget, people, etc., what keeps you up at night, or what is your biggest challenge?
Oh, I love this question. You know, I would say like some of the biggest challenges is this is not an easy solution. None of these are easy solutions. And I think we as community want to kind of find what's that simple fix, what's that, you know, easy way to do it. And you know, we get pushback from, you know, whether it's city council or, you know, other entities, you know, trying to find the one solution that'll just, you know, fix the problem in the short term. And it's not really thinking about the big picture. And my biggest challenge, I think, is bringing a lot of these regulators into the reality that it's going to cost money and it's going to take time to fix some of these issues. And what keeps me up at night, it's kind of a separate thing. You know, it's funny, the Ford mega site has been one of these things I've been tussling with because it's exciting. It's, you know, how can we make the green future? And I'll be talking about that in a little bit. But it's a lot's happening so fast, and we are going to have an unprecedented amount of water use throughout West Tennessee in an area that really we don't see a lot of water use. There's some manufacturing, you know, there's some farmers are on pivot wells, most of them rely on rainfall still. So we're going to see a massive change in these coming years, and the impacts on the aquifer are very unknown. So, well, thank y'all. So, and I'm just going to spend maybe 1 or 2, or maybe I'll say 2 or 3 minutes talking about the Byhalia Connection Pipeline, but what's going on right now. And so some of y'all are probably familiar with this big, you know, movement and fight that happened this past 2 years. And just to give you a quick overview, you know, it was a joint venture between Valero and Plains All American, which is both are Texas-based companies. And they wanted to connect the Diamond Pipeline to the Capline. And really, this was primarily for export. And the pipeline route that they chose was directly through the Davis well field. The permits that they needed didn't take into groundwater systems at all. And Plains All American attempted to use eminent domain to take land from some owners that didn't want to sell. And then to top it all off, they did not disclose that there was an actual alternative route that connects the two pipelines they wanted to connect. This Diamond Pipeline that now comes underneath the Mississippi River from Arkansas and connects to our Valero refinery here in South Memphis. And this Collierville pipeline makes its way past the airport, kind of straddles the Mississippi-Tennessee line, and it connects to this cap line that is currently being reversed for oil export to the Gulf. And Protect Our Aquifer had issues with this Byhalia Connection Pipeline for the reasons I listed above. Went through our well field. They're trying to take land uses power of eminent domain that should not be reserved for private companies. And there were just inconsistencies. They lied about the need because there already is an existing pipeline. They wanted more capacity, but they did not potentially think about expanding the size of the Collierville pipeline or using that existing easement. So, you know, if you pay attention to the news at all the past 2 years, I'm sure you heard about this. And we were successful in, you know, really pushing back as a community. And it wasn't just Protect Our Aquifer. It was Memphis Community Against Pollution and Pipeline. It was Sierra Club, Climate Reality Project. Really, folks across the United States galvanized around this issue. And so in July 2021, the Byhalia project was canceled. They filed, to our surprise, you know, they filed with the SEC to actually cancel this project. But we didn't feel that our work stopped there. Like I said, regulatory gaps were exposed. TDEC's permit didn't take into account groundwater. The Army Corps of Engineer permit didn't take into account groundwater. So we realized we needed to have additional protective laws. And so throughout that fall, this past fall, we worked to get 3 laws passed. 2 are in Memphis specific, and then 1 is county. But they all offer different levels of really just siting protections. So the Wellhead Overlay District is about, not putting hazardous development next to our wells. 1,500-foot setback is about not having crude oil pipelines within 1,500 feet of schools, churches, and parks. And then the rights of way law is about achieving an additional permit for any utility. Actually, this one was a much broader law. Any utility that would be needing to cross Memphis streets. And, those are big victories. Those were really big victories for us and the groups that we work with here. And what we saw just this month is that our state legislature has introduced a preemption bill. And I called it a switcheroo because the caption, but let me back up. We have not been really very active at the state level, state legislature level. We work with TDEC all the time. But we hadn't really been engaged in the state legislature. We don't monitor laws like that. We have a very small capacity. I am a staff of 1 and some wonderful fellows and a great board, but we just haven't had the capacity for that. And we got a red flag that this bill was trying to void all local control for siting oil and gas infrastructure. So as it originally was introduced, the 3 laws that we were successful in passing would have become void and null. We've been talking with the sponsor of the bill, Representative Kevin Vaughn out of Collierville, and we have been able to get amendments to that bill where the Wellhead Protection Law will now stand. It looks like there's going to be an additional amendment happening this Tuesday, where some of these other laws may still stand, but the way the law is written is it has very broad implications for all industrial facilities. Anything that has to do with processing oil and gas, with sand mining, potentially any type of industrial use could be preempted. Laws could be preempted about citing these. And so these are the kind of things where Protect Our Aquifer, we have this vision, we've got these big goals, we're working with key stakeholders and community members, but then we have to stay very flexible and we have to be nimble in order to jump into issues like this. And so an ask I will have of this group, we'll get to the last slide and there's a QR code. You can take action today on our website, send an email to Representative Kevin Vaughn if you're in the Collierville district, or send to the General Senate or the House Committee. So we'll be back in Nashville on Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. for the House Commerce Committee meeting. So if you want to road trip with us to Nashville and, have some presence at the state capitol that, we want to see this bill either continue to be amended and fixed for the safety of our community and of our water, or have this pulled and studied further in summer session. So that's my invitation for y'all. But I'm going to spend these last few minutes, I got about 10 minutes or so with y'all, 15, that I want to spend some time to talk about the quantity side of the situation and the Ford mega site. So this animation is from the USGS and it shows water level changes between the discovery of the aquifer and 2038. And you can start to see there are some major depressions forming, major areas where that water level is dropping. Now this area to our southwest Louisiana, the aquifer system is much shallower than what we have here. And so while it looks like a very drastic drop, it is a very drastic drop. I'm gonna close my blinds, the sun's setting real quick. There we go. So you can see, there is some issue there. They have additional water sources there. Our sole water source here in Shelby County and West Tennessee really is this aquifer system. And a lot of our users to the west of us in Arkansas. And what makes West Tennessee so special is that, remember when I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this recharge zone? This recharge zone is where our sands actually come to the surface, where rainwater can almost directly enter into our aquifer system and replenish what we're pumping out. But if you look at the diagram, it's really the only area in this 9-state region that has that recharge capacity. So this image to your left, this shows all of the various hydrogeologic units. So all of our geology, and this orange to blue band, that is that recharge zone. And you can see it's a broad swath of land, but compared to the whole system, it's not very big. And then I put a star where Ford is. Well, Ford will be. That's the mega site. So you can see it's right on that recharge zone, and development that will occur due to, you know, this new factory coming in is going to happen. A lot of it's going to happen right on top of our recharge zone. Now, the recharge zone doesn't act in one simple way. It's not one amount of, you know, one area is going to act the same across this whole swath. Recharge rates are going to differ depending on how much clay is in the area, the hillscapes, you know, really just what's going on there. And so to get a sense of, you know, just the mega site, like I said, this is one of those things that kind of keeps me up at night. I'm a little excited. I'm a little nervous. It's a happy medium. But here's the layout of the actual mega site. This came before Ford, and this was what, you know, the state was trying to sell. And so you've got 3 wells up top. You've got their water treatment plant. You've got an additional water tower. And then you've got this wastewater treatment plant. Now, the wastewater treatment plant has been a very contentious issue over the past decade because there aren't any major receiving streams here. And when we're talking about major industrial uses, you're going to have a lot of wastewater that comes from that. And originally the plan was to discharge into the Hatchie, but the Hatchie, you know, is a very beautiful natural environment. And there was a lot of concerns in the community to not have it go into the Hatchie. And so the state came up with a plan to pipe out that water to the Mississippi River. So now there is a, I think it's 34-mile wastewater line that goes from the mega site to the Mississippi River. So this is kind of the site layout, and you can just see how rural this area is. Predominantly ag land, little patchworks of forested land here and there, but this is going to be major land use changes. There's going to be the mega site footprint, but there's going to be the technical college. Redwood material is going to be one of the trying to figure out how to recycle these heavy metals and these toxic elements and reuse and recycle them. There's going to be new neighborhoods. There's going to be strip malls. This whole region is going to be changing. But what gives us hope is that Ford really has set the tone with their Blue Oval City, and they're saying all the right things about closed loop ecosystems and regularly recycled water and waste streams and the use of green infrastructure. And that is music to our ears. We're working with them closely now. And when we're thinking about the development outside of the mega site, we have to really consider, how do we balance the aquifer's bank account? We want that recharge to match extraction so that we are, you know, not depleting our resources, and that we're ensuring that contamination isn't a big factor either. And so the response to that is going to be smart regional growth. And that's going to be happening right now through the next decade or two. And so what do I mean by that? We want to be able to find where these recharge zone hotspots are. Are there specific areas where the recharge zone is functioning fast? Or are there areas where maybe there's a lot of clay and you know, there's not going to be a lot of that direct recharge that maybe aren't as vulnerable to contamination or to, you know, just recharging our aquifer. And so we are excited to say that we've been able to partner with NASA this past few months to actually use some of their Earth observation satellites to start to get a picture of this area. CSER, USGS, other entities have been doing recharge research, and they're doing it in physical measurements and small site by site. And what this NASA project has allowed us to do is get a sense of really the system as a whole using these satellite technologies. And one of the things that will come from this, we hope, is to see how can we further use these Earth observations for future studies. We're only beginning to understand this system. We haven't had crazy extreme water shortages like in California. We haven't had any major issues that are so prevalent that we've had this type of research done before, but we're reaching that moment in time where we really need to. And so in these last few slides, I just want to talk about, you know, some of these opportunities to do this right. And, you know, we've seen Shelby County develop in a time where we didn't understand our connection to the environment in a way that we do today. We didn't understand how these things can really impact our aquifer. And we have the knowledge now. And how can we really do this in a way that takes our living environment into account? And one of those strategies is going to be land conservation. And that's where Wolf River Conservancy's work is just so critical in understanding how do you protect some of these forested areas or even rewild some of these areas to bring them back to natural place. Low impact development has a couple different strategies to actually develop land in a way that attempts to approach that natural balance. One of my ideal goals is really introducing the concept of integrated water resource management, or One Water. And that's where you have drinking water systems, wastewater systems, and stormwater systems all managed as one. That's where you get One Water. And what that does is it enables to think about, okay, if we've got the stormwater system over here, we don't want to just send that water downstream super fast. You get flooding, you get channelized streams, you're reducing the ability for recharge to happen. And so when you have all of these things managed cohesively, you start to see where you can really reduce strain and really think about these things holistically. And then we want to think about zoning advocates. You know, a lot of this stuff is going to be local land use change, local zoning boards. And how can we have people in these communities that understand what this type of low impact development looks like and be willing to show up to zoning meetings and say, hey, developer so-and-so, love the idea, but where's the pervious pavement? Where's the green infrastructure? So that's something that we want to develop as an actual program in the coming years. And this is a list of folks that we collaborate with, whether it's in large scale or small scale. And this is where we really want to continue developing that integrated approach. All of these partners listed deal with water in some function and facet. And bringing these together is a key goal of Protect Our Aquifer, to really understand how we can all be moving forward together. And when we talk about zoning, you know, zoning has a lot of power. And when you have a natural system like this first image pictured, you know, the majority of your rain is actually going to infiltrate in. And like that's so important to our recharge, and that's so important to our water sustainability. And as you develop, you can have more and more impervious surface. Now, impervious surface is going to be your concrete, your roadways, your homes, your buildings and structures, where it reduces that ability for infiltration. And you can have different levels of zoning. You can have different levels of development. You can have different types of impervious surface requirements. And those are the kind of things we really want to continue to educate on when we're talking about what is low impact development. What is, doing this in a way that is, taking into account the natural environment. So this image, shows channelized stream. You see a lot of the streams in and around Memphis. That concrete line in it, that's not allowing the banks to, infiltrate in. It's not allowing that aquifer water to discharge in. So you're really disconnecting the systems. And things like green roofs and different types of stormwater filters and these types of permeable asphalts, permeable concrete and pavers, all of those things are implemented at the small scale, but when you're doing it over wide areas, it can really have a large impact. And with the mega site going in and what West Tennessee is going to look like, I mean, we have a really incredible opportunity to do this in a large scale. Right now, you see a lot of urban environments that are trying to retroactively, dig up concrete, pull up stuff and replace it in this way where they have, money and time. And it's expensive to do it on the back end. It's a lot less expensive to do it on the front end, and you're mitigating flooding, you're helping with water quality, and you're also providing habitat. So here's, just some other examples of what that low impact development can look like. But that pretty much, ends my presentation. So these are just kind of some of the current issues on the plate right now. Like I said, that Tennessee legislature, that's a quick issue. It's popped up. It's going to be gone in a month. And we hope that we're, successful in either stopping it or getting the bill to something that works for our local communities. We're still dealing with the TVA coal ash cleanup. That's a whole other presentation. But we do have arsenic pollution in Southwest Memphis that's dangerously close to Davis Wellfield. And TVA is actively moving that coal ash. One of our big concerns is really the process they used to determine how to move that coal ash. It was not transparent. They did not seek community input, and they're keeping that coal ash in Shelby County at a landfill in South Memphis. It's a better place than where it is now, so we're happy to see it moving, but it's going to have major impacts to South Memphis with 10 years of hundreds of trucks a day going through their neighborhoods. It's going to impact their air quality. It's going to impact their traffic. It's a whole other thing, but those are some of the partners that we have, locally too, that are looking beyond water, and we can bring that water expertise and that regulatory and policy expertise. And then, like I mentioned, Ford Megasite, remediation priorities, and creation of an entity that can really think about how do you manage all of these issues together. And so with that, I'll leave it here and open up for questions. But this QR code, if you hold up your phone, or you can go to our website, protectouraquifer.org, that will take you to our website. The Now webpage will take you to the actions you can take, those one-click emails I talked about. You can sign up to our newsletter, yard sign, join us on social media. You can donate. We are a 501c3. Would love to have your financial support. And this coming month, we are going to be launching our Aquifer 101 series. And so stay tuned for that. We're going to have traveling neighborhood educational series. We'll do Aquifer in a Cup, but then we'll talk about some of these contamination issues in that local community. So that will be announced sometime next month. And I'm just excited to get to spend World Water Day with y'all. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll leave it open to questions.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to keep my video off so you can refer to your PowerPoint if necessary. So here's a question. Where did you get your information on the number of center pivots in this region, and how old is that information?
That's a great question. So the USDA does keep some information about, where wells have been drilled. And some of these permits will be filed with TDEC, some are not. And so a lot of it's voluntary reporting. So not always the most accurate. And the latest data that I have from USDA is 2012. So 10 years old. So,
Yeah.
it's definitely outdated data source, and there's a lot to really figure out in that space.
Here's an important question. Can you please define recharge?
Great question. So recharge is the natural function where rainwater will infiltrate and be able to contribute into the actual aquifer system. So once water, when it rains, and through our stream systems as well, water will infiltrate into the ground. Some of that water will be sucked up through plant roots. Once it gets past that root system, then that water is going to be able to continue down and actually add to the water table and our actual aquifer. So recharge is that replenishment of water.
Yeah, and you might also mention that some aquifers are confined, like those in California, so they can't recharge, right?
Exactly right. And that's a really great point, Kathy. Where I am in downtown Memphis, we're in the confined part of the aquifer. That image that I showed earlier, where you got the layers, there's that shallow aquifer below us, but then there's that big, thick clay layer. That's that confined. So you have to go out to the east, to West Tennessee, to get that band of recharge.
Right. Okay, another topic, could the city and county possibly alter property tax rates over the recharge zones to encourage protection?
I like where your head's at. They could. And one of the key groups that we look at as kind of a best in class aquifer management is called the Edwards Aquifer Authority. And it is it's in Texas. It was formed in the early 90s, actually with an endangered species lawsuit. So I'm like, do we have any little critters that live in our aquifer? No. But they have quite a few different revenue sources and laws on the books about how do they protect those recharge zones. And so they have property tax rates. They do They do well permitting fees. They have a couple other revenue sources, and that's a key way. And then when we're talking about actual like protection over the recharge zone, you know, zoning laws are just so critical, where you can actually have impervious to pervious surface requirements. So you can't have too much concrete. You have to have some permeability. So that means instead of a quarter acre, neighborhood house, you've got maybe acre plots, or you are using pervious pavements. So those are the type of requirements that could be in zoning laws that really could help protect our recharge zones.
Okay. This may be about TVA, but I'll just read it as it's written. Why, how was MLG&W allowed to use our aquifers' limited fresh water rather than the Mississippi River for their recent power/water needs?
Ooh, that's a juicy one. So, so TVA, this is actually Protect Our Aquifers origin story. So when TVA decided to they were actually forced to decommission the coal power plant and build the new fracked gas plant right across the street. Their original plan for the cooling water for that plant was to actually have recycled wastewater. One of the city of Memphis's wastewater treatment plant is right across the street. Millions of gallons of access to water. There would need to be an additional level of treatment, and then TVA could use it for their cooling needs. And in a sneaky backroom decision, they filed permits with our Shelby County Groundwater Board back in, this is late 2016, to drill 5 freshwater wells on site that would pump between 3 to 5 million gallons of water per day. Then Sierra Club got notice. They filed a lawsuit to try and stop this. They got thrown out of court because they didn't have local standing. And so that was Sierra Club's lobbyist, Scott Banbury, and he called up Ward Archer. And he's like, hey, Ward, I know you're into the aquifer these days. Like, I need some help. I need an organization with local standing to fight this. And thus the creation of Protect Our Aquifer. And, years go by and Ward's like, wow, there's a lot more than just this issue. And here we are today. But what happened in that was TDEC mandated that TVA do a pump test. So Caesar, my former employer, and USGS were brought in to measure monitoring wells around that site. So when TVA flipped on their wells, they did drill, and to see what would happen with the water levels. And what they saw was a direct reaction. And that concern is that there's those polluted coal ash pits that have high levels of arsenic. Actually, that's what you see in this slide previous. These are the plumes of arsenic, fluoride, and lead that are in the shallow aquifer. So if they would have run those wells every day, 24/7, 365, they would be drawing those contaminants down faster. So TDEC said you can't use those permits. And so what TVA did, instead of going back to their original plan, they decided to purchase water from MLG&W. That water is still coming from the Memphis Aquifer. It's coming from the Davis Wellfield and the Allen Wellfield. So it's putting strain on our aquifer system still to this day. We have requested of TVA to use just what you're saying, Mississippi River water. What about shallow aquifer water? What about this treated wastewater system? And it's really, for TVA, it's come down to cost. They don't want to put that initial cost in. And that's an issue we are not done with. We want to see that happen, but now you've got TVA as MLGW's largest water customer. They're using the most water, and they're paying MLGW a lot of money for that water. And it's still coming from our aquifer system.
Very concerning. Okay, there's a lot of concern around petroleum pipelines. Just how big is the problem with pipelines leaking?
That's a good question. And Protect Our Aquifers, one of our biggest concerns isn't so much a big, huge, massive spill. I mean, yes, that would be awful and very concerning, but it's more of an undetected leak. And in the past 10 years, there have been 8,000 major leaks. And major leaks mean there's been over $50,000 in damages.
Hmm.
We're like, that's a lot of leaks, but that's not minor leaks. That's not the ones that went undetected or are still undetected. And one thing that actually in this current, legislative battle we're dealing with right now, it's an East Tennessee landowner, and he actually was a retired Chevron pipeline engineer. So he's actually on our side saying, local government and local regulation is just part of the job of building pipelines. And he's the one that told me that the majority of pipeline leaks we see today are with pipelines that have been built in the last 10 years.
Hmm.
And that just really surprised me. I thought it would be the older infrastructure, but apparently I don't know why, but that's what the data is showing, that the newer pipelines are actually leaking more frequently.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is not comforting.
Sorry.
Okay. Oh, two more questions. All right. Eli would like to know how much pollution enters the aquifer each year. Maybe how we test for it would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great question. We don't know. To be totally honest, we don't know. We know certain sites. We know areas where the pollution's coming. Maybe it hasn't hit the aquifer yet, but that's part of Protect Our Aquifer's big goal about this broader management and actually having the resources to do this type of study, because it's very patchwork, it's very piecemeal. And what happens right now is, if MLDW, they do regular water quality monitoring, and it's usually after the water's been treated, and Caesar and USGS and others have actually been doing water testing at the actual wells. And that's where we see pollution hitting. And by the time it gets to a well, like, that's too late. MLDW has shut down wells due to contamination. And so to be proactive in this would actually be to find the sources of pollution before they hit the wells. And so short answer to that is we have no idea how much pollution enters the aquifer every year.
Okay.
Happy World Water Day, y'all.
Oh man, no, this is great. This is really great information. So here's another question. Are you saying that we don't have pervious percentage requirements for developing land? I am from coastal North Carolina, where all development had these requirements, and I'm now in Collierville and about to attend a meeting about a nearby planned development application.
That's a really good question. So we do have some, and they mostly are pertain to parking lots. And so the Shelby County and Memphis has a joint unified code, and then some of the other municipalities in the county do have their own. And there are some pervious percentage requirements, but you being from, I think you said coastal North Carolina, that I'm making an assumption here. I would assume y'all would have much more progressive pervious requirements, because you get a lot of rainfall and you probably deal with, some types of storm surges. And Collierville is right on the edge of the recharge zone. So that clay layer really pinches out right at Collierville. And so, it's our belief that these pervious percentage requirements should be higher. So they do have some, and I'm not as familiar with Collierville as I am their actual requirements as I am the Shelby County Unified Development Code, but it really pertains primarily to parking lots.
Okay, well, I'm going to pull up my video so I can sign off. We are done with questions, except for a wonderful comment which says, "Sarah, you are our Erin Brockovich." Work.
I will take that as a compliment. Thank you so much.
And so I am really grateful that you're here too. It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you everybody for joining in, and I hope that, like me, you learned a lot. And I'll be so excited to see what actions Protect Our Aquifer takes in the future. We have a World Water Day project this weekend. If you can't volunteer, please remember that you can celebrate World Water Day by picking up trash anywhere you are, because all of it can end up in waterways, or supporting Protection of our Aquifer or Wolf River Conservancy, or any number of other ways. Our next project after World Water Day will be our Earth Day project on April 23rd. And we will have another lecture before that on sustainable design and architecture. So please plan to join us for that. Thank you very much, Sarah. You were just great. And everyone have a nice evening.
Absolutely. Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.
Great job. Great job.
Appreciate it, Keith.
Thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.